The world underwater, every week. I'm Tom Ingram, President and CEO of DEMA, and you're listening to the Deeper Blue Podcast.
Hey guys, it's Megan Haney-Greer, co-host of the Deeper Blue Podcast. And today it is so wonderful to be speaking with the legendary conservation photographer and SeaLegacy co-founder, Paul Nicklen. It's likely you've seen Paul's incredible images over the last few decades in the pages of National Geographic magazine. And today he shares some with us about his obsession for the Arctic and one nearly hypothermic dive spent hiding behind some ice that left him feeling the happiest he's ever been in his whole life. Paul, so lovely to have you on the show today. Where are you today?
Thanks, Megan. It's a real pleasure to be here. I am at home in British Columbia on the east side of Vancouver Island, and we're just getting prepared to head to our boat, the SeaLegacy 1, which is in Panama, right after the UN event in New York. And then we'll be at sea for about 8 months straight, filming around the Pacific.
Wow, that's amazing. Can we start off with just an introduction of who you are and what you do?
My name is Paul Nicklen. I'm a conservation filmmaker, the co-founder of the nonprofit SeaLegacy, and only one, a contributor to National Geographic, and just a concerned and passionate citizen of this planet.
You've obviously spent a lot of time in the water. Then you continue to lead the ocean expeditions for SeaLegacy and so many other things. But how did you begin? How did diving start for you?
It's very funny. I mean, I grew up in Baffin Island as a young kid, and I lived on the sea ice with the Inuit, and we would travel for great distances. And I think when you grow up in a community with 190 Inuit people and you don't have a telephone or a radio or a television, you become extremely connected to the world around you. We spent all of our time outside playing under the aurora borealis, listening to folklore like Kudlu-Pidlu, the sea monsters who would take us down and eat us if we got too close to the water's edge. And so it just filled my mind full of visuals, and I became very obsessed with the ocean. And, this is way back in the 70s, and all we had were books, and we had all the Jacques Cousteau books. So I would just sit day after day pouring through those as a kid with just time to read these books and become obsessed. But when you live in as a minority in such a small world, you don't think that there's any opportunity for you. And then when I finally ended up going to the University of Victoria, that's where I was walking by onto class one night. I'm 18 years old, and it said diving lessons for 4 months of diving lessons, $120. And so I was like, what do you mean? I can go diving? I actually can become a diver? And it's just sort of an epiphany and an incredibly exciting moment that took me on this journey.
What keeps you coming back?
I just think that it is an absolutely other world down there. It's another planet. From a conservation point of view, I think most people stand on a beach and they stare out across the water and think that all is perfect and beautiful in the world. And I realize that very few people are going to get to see the underwater world. And it's my job as a conservationist, as a journalist, to bring that world to everyone, to just show them the beauty, but also show them what's at stake and what we've lost and what we continue to lose. And that's a big role for me. That's sort of what inspires me to get in the water every day. I also would say, in this world of telephones and DMs and texts and, emails and Zoom calls, that I think I have ADD, but maybe I don't. But I am like Dustin Hoffman in The Graduate, that just get me underwater, get me away from the noise of life, and let me meditate and be lost in the ocean or a lake or a river with salmon or no animals. It doesn't matter. I mean, you think of the amount of money and time and effort we're putting into going to space, and this talk of moving to Mars. You get it, divers get it, but when you float there weightless in the ocean and you're surrounded by a whale or dolphins or an octopus or a school of fish, is there anything more beautiful on this planet?
On the note of conservation, with the incredible images that you've captured over your lifetime, being a visual storyteller and working to convey that conservation message, can you tell us more about SeaLegacy and how that came to be?
Absolutely. From a young age, I fell in love with the Arctic, and I knew I had to do something to protect it. And so the logical thing after university, even though I was obsessed with diving, I went back north and became a biologist. And I was working on lynx, snowshoe hares, wolves, caribou. But the highlight for me was working on polar bears. of being out on the sea ice and doing the science. And then I thought if I could bridge the gap between the work that my peers are doing and by becoming a journalist for something like National Geographic, then, that would be a great job for me to translate and educate and inform. And then after 20 years with National Geographic, which was, the highlight of my life professionally, it was 2014 and I was taking some people around the Arctic to film and photograph polar bears. Well, in a place that was only 500 miles from the North Pole, we never found very many live bears. It was a disastrous trip. There was no sea ice to be found anywhere in a place that is historically covered in sea ice year round. But on one day, we found two bears that had starved to death. And that was when I'm like, National Geographic is amazing. It's the best of the best. But that was at the same time that my Instagram account was growing quickly. National Geographic's Instagram account was growing quickly. And I thought we need to take a serious look at this. And if we can build our own over-the-top communication platform to get the world involved on these issues, if I can then, instead of shooting for a year or two on a big assignment for National Geographic and putting it up for 1 month and then it's there for 1 month and then gone forever, what if we can beat this drum every day through just little sound bites, in this sort of ADD world that we've come to live in, and just to keep reminding people. And all of a sudden, before you know it, I have several million followers. National Geographic has 100 million followers. And then Christina, my partner in life and my boss at SeaLegacy and only one, we launched SeaLegacy back in 2014 is when we said, let's do this. For me, it's just that thin molecular curtain of the surface that you're standing on a beach, staring out over this perfect, beautiful sea. It's calm and the light's reflecting, and it's just taking your mask and going from an inch above the surface to an inch below the surface. And you see a very different world where you see ocean acidification, the coral reefs are dying, the fish just aren't there, the salmon returns aren't coming back. And it's to find a rhythm that allows people into this world without making it too depressing. And in our channels that we have built, it's kind of like boxing, a boxing metaphor, jab, 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 punch. And that is, jab is beautiful. It's interesting. Here's a beautiful animal. Isn't this gorgeous? Look how cool these creatures are. You keep jabbing. And then finally, boom. By then they care, they're involved, they're invested. And then they're ready and open to receive terrible news of a starving polar bear or what have you, or overfishing, or, the tragedies that are taking place in our oceans. And that's that rhythm that we're finding works really well.
Through SeaLegacy and the other work that you do, how are you getting people involved? What can we do as divers and citizens?
Absolutely, Megan. Great question. And I mean, the beautiful thing about what we have built, it just started with social media. We started posting and sharing, and all of a sudden people were invested in us. And then in 2017, we put up that starving polar bear video, became the most viral video in the history of National Geographic on their feed as well. 2.5 billion people saw that video around the world. So over a quarter of the planet saw it. People were stopping us in Rwanda. Telling us in airports that they had seen it and they were touched and moved. And that's when we realized the power of a single visual put in front of the international court of public opinion can really wake up the world. But where do people go? Where do they put their energy? So then that's when we started planning, like, okay, SeaLegacy is the expedition visual storytelling branch of our organization. Then we co-founded an organization based out of New York called Only.one. And this is a platform where now people who care, concerned citizens of the planet, or people who want to just follow along and see the content, but all of a sudden they can get involved and actually take an action. And then whether it's through a donation, whether it's through a signature, whether it's through getting involved, then their action becomes trackable. Everybody who joins Only.one, it's like a Patreon account, but for conservation. Whenever we have a win, like keeping big oil out of Lofoten region of Norway, or when we are able to ban these big mile-long death nets off the coast of California that have a 9-to-1 bycatch ratio, they get to share in that victory. And what we are doing, what I love the most about SeaLegacy and Only One, is almost all of the Tide funding. People go and they join the Tide right there on the SeaLegacy site or the Only.one site. You can join the Tide. We take the majority of that money and we are using it to grow and help amplify the work of every other organization that we meet along the way. We just gave $20,000 in Panama to help the people patrol the beaches, to keep poachers off the beaches, to protect the turtle populations. Whatever we can do to help grow other ocean conservation groups. And that's where I think we're going to have the most success, is when we all rise up and work together.
With all of your world travels and diving and the amazing experiences you've had, I think this is probably going to be a extremely difficult question. But I would love to hear from you if there's one particular dive and experience underwater that really rises to the top for you. That's kind of a touchstone in your life.
There's a million answers, but I think that I have, for the amount of diving, we have thousands of dives, and we've, been underwater on scuba a ton, and, I dive rebreathers and they're amazing. I think my best dives have been on my snorkel. And when I've been able to just float on the surface and not even have to free dive, but not move. But when you get to slowly drift up to a pod of narwhals, there are, 20 male narwhals coming towards you with their 10-foot long ivory tusks, and you're using the ice to hide behind so they can't echolocate you. And then to see the males come underneath you and all their tusks point towards you and they start to click and echolocate you, and they get more curious, and you have all these, these ivory tusks coming towards you, and then to see them disappear into the depths knowing they can dive to 5,000 feet. Those moments are like, are you kidding me? Am I seeing this? Where you sort of crawl back onto the sea ice, frozen, you can't feel anything, you can't feel your face, your feet, you're borderline hypothermic, but you're just the happiest you've ever been in your life. Just these gifts from the sea. I always say that on my deathbed, I'm not going to be surrounded by money or any awards or any covers of magazines or posters. I'm going to be surrounded by hopefully some friends and family and just a whole lifetime of these just life-changing, incredible moments that have come from the sea. And that's the greatest gift of all.